Welcome, everybody. I'm Laura DeFranco, the CEO of Brave Healer Productions, where we have a mission to change the world one brave word at a time. And today we're celebrating one of our newest books, The Ancestors Within. Volume 2 is called Discover and Connect with Your Ancient Origins. You guys, I have some of the amazing author experts here with me today to share their wisdom. But first, let me just say a big ass thank you to Amy Gillespie Doherty, our lead author. Amy is bringing the world's leading experts in ancestral healing together in this series of powerful books, and has a big mission to change the world with these powerful stories and tools that you guys are going to read. Super excited. And Amy, thank you for getting these authors together in this book. So authors, welcome. I'm happy to have you here this morning.
Good morning.
How you doing? Yes. Oh my goodness, you guys. Darlene, the herb mom de la Plata, has been restoring hope since 1987 by helping clients co-create positive action plans for health and prosperity through her ministry, Abundant Health and Wellness Services. I have Reverend Mary Perry here. She owns Wings Unfurled and helps her clients to connect to their angel mentors for guidance. And Larry Lambert is co-owner of Galaxy Hypnosis, director of the Omni Hypnosis Training Center of Washington, D.C., and part-time genealogist. Oh my goodness, we're going to have a nice conversation today, you guys. So I'm going to go with Darlene to start this party off. Tell us about the chapter that you wrote, Darlene.
Thank you, Laura. My chapter that I wrote is chapter 21. And it's called You Are the Antidote, the Power of Speaking Blessings into Your Lineage. So a little bit about that. I really feel very strongly about the power of words and how we can change the destiny, not only of our own lives, but the lives of our children and our grandchildren. And what I mean by you are the antidote is right now I see a big need for people all over the world, but in our own communities and our own families, to overcome fear. And fear drops your vibration and you raise it with words. And so we really are the antidote for ourselves, for everything that's going on in the world right now.
I love that. You know, you're funny and amazing, because like there's this whole question I want to ask you guys about this. So here you go, like right into the party of it. So tell me a little bit about the tool that you're offering in your chapter, because you guys, so first of all, thank you all for saying yes to this project, for stepping up and sharing those authentic stories, and then taking it one step further, because we wanted to offer some practical things people could do to connect with their ancestors. So tell me a little bit more about your tool, Darlene.
Well, part of what I talk about is when we're breaking the cycle of generational curses. So there's generational blessings and curses. And when families keep repeating the same trauma over and over, whether it's poverty or abuse or addiction, you can try to go back to maybe where you feel it started, or at least the stories where it began, and have a conversation. You know, it's like sit down with the photograph of that ancestor, get into prayer, raise your vibration, and just try to, I like to use tools called quantum jumping, where you kind of, there's ways that you can ask the version of yourself that exists in any dimension and reality to how they got to where they are. But you can also go into your heart center and you can ask that ancestor really what was causing their pain. And from there, when you transform it for the past, you transform it for all of the future generations, because time is not linear, what we've all been taught.
Okay, so one last thing on this. So here I am, and I just know enough to be dangerous, and I might begin to have these conversations with my ancestors, but you know, Darlene, I'm not really practiced in hearing anything back, and I'm not hearing anything back, and I get frustrated with that, and I don't know what to do. What am I doing wrong? What would you tell somebody who's in that space of just starting to seek and understanding that some of these tools might offer them some possibilities, but they don't hear anything back?
Right. So it's not always about hearing. Sometimes it's just an image that you'll see in your mind, maybe of flowers, and you'll think, what does that mean? Or you might see the image of a small child crying in the corner, or laughing and playing. It can be images, it can be sounds, it can be a feeling. It's learning to trust your inner knowing. It's learning to trust that connection that you have with God, where these images are actually coming from, to transmute all past um, things that are really affecting you right now. Because all these seeds of things that are happening in you right now, they don't all come from you. They came from generations past. And so how much has that been watered through the family line? And then are you going to pull them as weeds and start over? And so it's really learning to trust that. It doesn't have to be words I hear, but other people sense it, other people feel it. So you just have to learn to trust that. And there's little exercises you can do for that.
Yes, thank you so much for being willing to explain it a little bit. I know that we have people kind of all over the spectrum of just dipping their toe in all the way to the other end. So I appreciate your going there and letting us know what those possibilities are. So Mary Perry, would you tell us about your beautiful chapter?
Sure. I am in chapter 10 called The Angel Mentors, Finding Connection Through Inspiration, Healing, and Love. And my story is about how I came to find the angels, start my healing journey. I didn't really start until I was 40, and I'm still on that journey. I thought I would heal something, it'd be done, my life would be stellar, not quite the way it works. But for me, when I was 16, I had a baby that I gave up for adoption. And she was very much wanted. She was not a mistake. And yet I knew if I had kept that child, the ancestral stuff that was in my family was going to trickle down to her. And I really felt that the best thing for her was to have hopefully a loving family raise her that had different circumstances perhaps than my family did. So that happened way back then. I think the ancestral beliefs and traits and all of that were coming through. I had a grandmother who was Czechoslovakian, and I also had Celtic in my background. Her husband was Irish. And so for me, my grandma was part of who gave me my gift. A week or so before she passed, I had a dream where she took me to a mall because we love shopping together. And we went into a special store where there was a Native American, and she made special tools for me. And my grandmother purchased them and handed them to me. And a week later, she passed. At the time, was I really aware? I wasn't quite aware of the ancestral piece at that point. But as the angels came back in after my dad passed, and in my chapter, I talk about how I talked to him a year after he passed away on the phone. And that's really what opened me up. And finding the angels for me was just a beautiful way of starting the healing process.
So you said something about the age you were when things started to percolate and spark and your understanding. So I love that so much, because it is never too late to have a moment that changes your whole life. Tell me more about that.
So at age 40, my dad was passing from lung cancer. And my dad and I did not have a good relationship. He was abusive, and I loved him. But when he passed, I didn't like him very much. And I had moved home because my mother was very much a 50s housewife who didn't drive, didn't do the bills, didn't know how to balance a checkbook, none of that. And so I moved home the last month he was passing to help out. And there were just many times that he and I clashed because I wasn't just going to take what he said. But a year after he died, I called my mom to see how she was doing. And the voicemail on the phone was his voice that we had erased over the year before. I was at work here in Maryland, that was in Pennsylvania. I'm like, I couldn't believe it. I was just like, oh my gosh. And I hung up and was crying. And I called back a second time, got the same message. The third time, my mom was coming in from church and I'm going, "What did you do?" She's like, "What are you talking about?" Nothing. So I knew that my dad was trying to come through. And I do believe that finding the angels after he passed was a way of him asking me for forgiveness for all of the things that transpired in my life. And so I'm really grateful for that. And I wouldn't have changed anything in any way, shape, or form. So
Yeah, amazing.
yeah.
And beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
And these are the kinds of stories that you guys are going to hear in the book. I know I said thank you for stepping up in that authenticity, you guys, but I have to say that it really does take some courage to do that. So I'm going to remind our listeners that we have some first-time authors and some seasoned authors sharing stories that they've never written about before, or pieces of their life where they're offering to you, you know, that little window. So y'all are badass, seriously. So thank you. Larry, tell me about your amazing chapter.
Laura, I wrote chapter 14, Discovering Myself Within My Ancestral Lineage, which is really the starter point for many people. Like you were saying, many people don't have experience at doing this. They don't know how to receive from the ancestors. My goal was to give them something that they could begin the journey to figure out who their ancestors are, because many people don't know who, beyond their immediate parents and grandparents, they don't know where they came from. They don't know the history of the different ancestors that they had. And the more that you know about the people that created who your parents are, that led down to who you are, helps you understand the framework for where we are. I love the way Mary had mentioned the issue that her mom was a 50s mom, and there was a stereotypical way of how things were done, and she was just following it. And I try to tell the people that do the research, because it's not hard research, it's just something that you have to learn so that you can find out who the ancestors were, and then get into the mindset of the ancestors that you're dealing with, because they didn't live in today. They didn't have cell phones. They didn't have all the nuances we have. Many of those people lived within a 12-mile circle, and many of them were raised, their families, worked their whole life and died, and very seldom ever left that circle. And while that's unfathomable to us today, it gives you a new framework to imagine what it would have been like. And the day-to-day boredom of just living. And I say boredom, it was very exciting to them in some days, and some days it was the worst they ever had. But they didn't move out of that circle, which means you probably knew who you were going to marry within the first 10 years of your life, because it's going to be somebody that you're interacting with. You just don't know who it'll be. And our ancestors give us so much, the value. I make the quote that if we don't learn history, we're doomed to repeat it. The mistakes that people make over and over again. Now, some of that is a pattern that is caused by ancestral karma, but other issues are just you didn't know any better, and you didn't take the time to learn it. So that's where I try to bring it together. So I'm teaching you how to do the genealogy to track back who those people are for you, so that you can see what those lessons are.
Even the mindset. So this part really changed the way I started to think about my own, this exact part that you're talking about, and understanding that mindset, what could have been, probably was completely different for some of the reasons that you mentioned. So why is that so important? We want that knowledge. We want to know who those people are. And we specifically want to understand their circumstances so that what?
If you understand the circumstances they were raised in and the choices that they were making, then it'll help you frame how you're going to make choices and decisions. Actually, we live in a world right now, and it's interesting because people of my generation look back and they say, well, you've got those millennials and they seem to be all screwed up and their values are not right. And it's not that their values aren't right. They're living the values that they learned as they grew up. It's just they have a different framework. And this is the perfect example of it. Or when we go back and we look at people in history and we try to judge them by the standards of today, which is truly unfair because their entire world was shaped differently. Another example is the cell phone. People look at the kids today and they say, well, they can't put the cell phone down for 5 minutes. You know, I would love to go back to my grandfather or my great grandfather and give them a device that ties them into everything in the world. It's got its own internal library. It's got ways of learning things that you can't even imagine. And the limiting 12-mile circle I was talking about was quite a barrier to get past. And this cell phone takes you out of it and you don't even have to go anywhere.
Yes.
They wouldn't have put it down either,
Yeah.
but they don't understand the value of it. They think it's just a phone.
You're right. They wouldn't have put it down either. You are so right. I love that. Oh my gosh. And what an incredible example of our time, thinking back to those times. Larry, thank you for writing that particular chapter and helping us in that way. I know I appreciated that very much. So I have this next question for all of you, and I'm going to start with Mary for this one. So it is clear to me after reading these chapters that ancestral healing and connecting with the ancestors, this is a transformational tool for all of you. What I really want to know, Mary, is what was one of the biggest ahas you had when you started to learn about this?
For me, it was the inner wisdom that has come down from all of my ancestors through decades, millennials, all of that, and come into my being and being able to trust that information. For me, the connection was through my angels, but I understand that this information has been born inside of me for many lifetimes. So it's trusting.
And the turning point for the trust?
I'm still working on that.
Yeah,
It's
a
an
practice,
ongoing,
right?
it's a practice, it's an ongoing process. When I first started, I have this little sign that was metal and said trust and had a little bell on it. And I would put it in my living room on my ceiling fan. And even when the ceiling fan wasn't on, if I was not trusting what I was hearing inside, the little bell would go off. So, you know, like I said, it's an ongoing process.
And all of these tools, just a little tidbit for our listeners too. These are things that you can have an immediate result with. And these things are practices and lifelong practices and even discipline. The healing tools are really powerful. And that connection with that inner, I call her my inner warrior, is powerful. I know. So I appreciate that is one of your ahas, Mary. It's life-changing, seriously.
It is life-changing, absolutely.
So Larry, how about you? What was one of the ahas for you on this journey?
So my gift is actually inner knowing, meaning that things just come up and they're there. I don't hear a voice. I don't have a vision. I work as a hypnotist and I'm working with people, and all of a sudden I'll start saying something that Larry wouldn't say. And sometimes I surprise myself. And then the client comes back and says, oh, how'd you know my boss was talking to me about that? Or how'd you know this was going on in my life? And that's where, for what Mary was talking about, that inner knowing, you have to trust it because, and I do totally now, because when I start saying those things that Larry wouldn't say, I then move forward. So as I was doing my ancestral genealogy, as I'm going back and I'm learning who these people were, and it's fascinating because these are the people that one of them was a navigator in a B-17, and he died over Germany during the war. I found that out, and I immediately have this connection with him. And sometimes I see things that tell me that he's with me and he's giving me advice. Now, he's somebody I can relate to because I'm a retired Army Master Sergeant. I have connections with the military that he was living in, and that's what he was immersed in when he passed. But the other ancestors and relatives that I've had, I can go back and look at them fresh and understand that they had a hard life. They had challenges that we didn't see. And when I focus on that, I can feel some of the frustration and I can feel some of the pushback that they were trying to make. And I can see why the successes in their lives were so amazing. And we don't do that. In our day-to-day life, we get so wrapped up in who we are that we don't value what other people are going through. And that's part of when you do this, you're realizing that the world is much bigger than you are. And that if you pay attention to what's happening around you, those people are telling you a story and they're laying out what's going on within them. And of course, everybody we run into is a reflection of something we're supposed to learn. No one walks into your life that isn't teaching you something, guiding you through something. And maybe they're showing you something you don't like about yourself, but it's all a lesson. And you see that when you start looking outside yourself and see the things around you.
So did you know you had the knowing when you were a kid?
Well, that's interesting. I had a really severe problem of deja vu when I was a kid because I would have dreams about situations that would happen. Maybe, and it wasn't something profound. Sometimes it was just a family dinner and there's a conversation going on. And I had that dream like 3 weeks before it actually happened. So then I made it a game. Can I change it? Can I make it different? And you know what? I couldn't.
Yeah.
But I knew that I knew things were going to happen and how they were going to come out. So, but I didn't list it as something psychic or something like that. I joined the Army. I went off and I was a soldier for 20 years. And then I came back and I found this calling through being a hypnotist because it opened my horizons to accept people that I would never have had in my life otherwise.
I
And
love hearing these kinds of stories too. And it's interesting that lately I've talked to multiple people who were in the military and that was the journey. And then something shifted where they came upon, in your case, it was becoming a hypnotist, which is a pretty interesting, right? And could be very, very drastically different than the environment that you came from.
I totally changed direction in my life. And many of the people that I were best friends and spent much time with have fallen away because they don't want to look that deep into themselves. They don't want to, they're happy at the outer edges of life, not digging into the inner part of what it can be. But everybody's where they're supposed to be. And that's another thing that I've learned is that everybody's on their own journey and they will heal at their own choice and their own time.
Yes, for sure. Thanks, Larry. Darlene, biggest aha on this journey for you?
So for me, it was really bringing home the fact that we are truly either a conscious creator of our life or we become an unconscious creation. And what I mean by that is we really are like this holographic canvas that's being painted constantly with all the input that we're picking up, whether it's from ancestors or from our current situation. And we have the ability to create anything we want in our lives. And we have an army of spiritual architects that live inside of our body that are waiting for us to give them their marching orders, that to talk like the service. I was a former military wife. So they're waiting for us to give them their marching orders, and we don't. Instead, we kind of default to this ancestral programming loop of, well, everybody in my family died of this, and well, we've always been poor, or whatever it is. And I mean, we have the power to change that, and not everyone is willing to step into that power. it's a lot easier for them to say, poor me, because if they have the work to do, then they're not willing to take that kind of responsibility. They want it to be somebody else's fault. And so really stepping into the driver's seat of that is a limitless potential roller coaster ride. So that was powerful for me to really dive in a little further about that information.
Yes, I've written several times that taking full responsibility for every single thing in your life is really, sounds really bad, but it's ultimate freedom.
Right.
I mean, it sounds scary as hell, but ultimately that's the place where the possibilities are.
So that's exactly true. So I even think about growing up in a super traumatic early part of my life, and the things that kind of shook me up to cause me to start my life over. And you think you wouldn't have chosen that, but did we choose it anyway? And so it just becomes really fun. It's like picking electives when you're in school. Do I want ceramics? Do I want painting? Do I want, any of those things? And so we're choosing electives to help us create who we are, and we're choosing people, and we're choosing events. And like I said, this army inside of us is just waiting, and it will draw to us and create for us exactly what we need.
And that is exciting to me. Okay, guys, so this next question, this was the one where I made that comment about what you were talking about, Darlene. And so this is something that I want the listeners to understand in terms of this topic of our beautiful book, The Ancestors Within, right? There's the army of souls that are there waiting, and they're waiting for us to make a connection. So nothing's going to happen unless you are, I think, open and willing, first of all. But a lot of us forget to ask. We forget to connect. We forget to even try to have a conversation. So Larry, I'm actually going to start with you on this question. So a lot of people, I'm laughing because basically everybody this last couple of years has had a tough time. There's been a lot going on with these last couple of years of life on this planet. And some of our listeners might still be feeling a little stuck on the journey. So how do you think connecting with our ancestors can help if someone's listening and they're still feeling a little bit stuck like that?
That's actually a great question, because the answer to that, which actually Darlene and Mary have both talked about, is everything we do is a choice. But most people are on automatic pilot. You think you're making choices, but in reality, you're just going through a ritual that started, you're working through, and you go on. And the challenge is to make everything a choice and realize that each thing you do, and ask yourself, is what I'm doing furthering my goals? Does it put me where I want to be? And what I would recommend, connecting with your ancestors show you, because you have many of those folks that were on automatic pilot and didn't choose. They got up every morning, they worked hard, they let life slam into them over and over again, and they ended with fate. Or you get those people that have a goal, that have a plan, that want to do something, so they work towards that goal. They set an intention when they get up in the morning. And they say, today I'm going to have a productive day. I'm going to achieve these things, and I'm going to work forward. And they don't beat themselves up if they don't achieve everything on that list, because they realize that life happens in between there. And that's often the universe showing us there's a better path, there's a better way. Like you said, those people are not understanding that that challenge put in front of them, showing them a better way, isn't a personal attack. The universe isn't happening against you. It's happening in response to you. And that you are an amazing creator. And that as you make your choices, the universe is going to either, well, it always gives you what you ask for or what you focus on. But you have to be careful about what you're focusing on. And our ancestors, in many cases, were focusing on just living from day to day. And it was a hard struggle. So their day to day became a hard struggle. And over time, it just kept working and it would grind them down. But yet, if you look at other ancestors, they went out and they were successful and they achieved things and they created amazing relationships. They built businesses out of things that shouldn't have happened at all. They took the challenge of life and made it something for them. And those are the examples we have within our own family. Now, some people's job in this life is to be a bad example, is to show you how not to be. And
Yes.
we have to credit them too, although we don't want them living in our house. But we do want them, take their lessons and work from them so that we can make a better life for ourselves. And I say a life for ourselves, it's not just for ourselves. You're making a life for your family. You're making a life for the people that you associate with. If you're the positive person in the room, if you're finding that positive solution, then everybody's going to look up to you and everybody's going to try to follow that. And the few people that don't are the people who are disgusted that you're so happy and that you're accomplishing things. And it's okay for them not to like you because their job is to be miserable as an example to other people. One last thing before I go, and this is kind of important. We often forget that suffering is a part of learning and growing, and that people around us are learning and growing and learning their lesson through that suffering. And it's not our job to end that suffering. It's okay to support, it's okay to give them a hand up when you can, but that there's a lesson in what they're doing. Allow them to learn that lesson if they need to. Don't enable them out of it, because then they won't have learned the lesson. So we have to find a balance. And that's what, for me, understanding my ancestral line and who they are and how they came about and what they've achieved, helped me understand that everybody's that you meet is doing this for the first time. I was in the military. Everybody that you meet is doing that job for the first time. And it doesn't matter if it's the private or the general. They're doing that job for the first time. So you have to give them the leeway to make mistakes and learn as they move forward. And we have to do that both for ourselves and for those around us.
Yes, this is some badass awareness that Larry is dropping on us today, you guys. And when you have awareness tools, you have ways to change your life, basically do anything you want to do. I love it, Larry. Thank you. So Darlene, I'm going to move to you with this question.
Okay.
Some of our listeners might be feeling a little stuck, and it's been kind of an interesting year and a half, almost 2 years. How can connecting with our ancestors help?
So I like to play a lot of games with my clients, and what I try to teach them is a what if game. And if we can wrap our minds around the idea that we are perhaps 1% physical and 99% invisible, and in that invisible frequency ball of energy that is the palette for our canvas, we carry ancestral vibrations, teachings from many, many generations, at least 7 generations, if not more. We carry those things. But it's kind of like being exposed to a bacteria or something else, or a parasite. The vibrations of those things are in that energy ball. Our totem pole of frequency determines what gets in and what becomes part of us. So our job to keep the force field of interference out for things that are happening in the world, we need to raise our vibration. We need to stay in the fruits of the spirit, but in conscious awareness of higher frequency thoughts, feelings, and love, gratitude, forgiveness, joy. Those things raise your vibration. And think of Star Trek. Think of shields up, Scotty, right? So that the dome goes up over your ball of energy. But because we're human beings, and we're not human doings, we tend to fall short. And when we go below the line, we fall into the totem pole realm of, somebody cuts us off on the freeway, somebody gives us a horrible phone call, we have a crazy interaction with someone, and we fall into, anger, resentment, bitterness, guilt, shame, and fear, and so on. And those things actually create disease. They take the shields down, now those things that are trying to get in, they can only be activated by low vibration. And we carry a lot of that from generational stuff. And learning to recognize the things that want to seep in on a regular basis, that's usually stuff that's in our line. And you can always ask the question, you can ask your spirit, is this mine? And usually the answer is no. It usually belongs out here. And learning how to delete those things out of your field so that they don't affect you will help you keep your vibration high, help you keep your shield up, so that you have, we have enough to deal with in life, right? That why not make our job easier? Keep our frequency ball huge, keep it vibrating high. When we pass strangers on the street, when we're feeling good, that ball is huge, and their ball is huge if they're feeling good. And our spirit men are like high-fiving each other when they walk by, and we feel connected even though we are surrounded by strangers. And by staying in fear, your ball shrinks low, and their ball shrinks low, and there's no high-fiving because there's all this, distance between us. And so be strategic about that, expand your frequency, tap into what the ancestors are teaching you, what you're carrying around in your field, and rise above that. And you'll be more encouraging to others, more encouraging in your own life and in your own home and your own community, when other people are looking for answers.
I love that so much. There's so many things about that. I hadn't thought of a totem pole in a really long time. So thanks for that visual. Okay. I like that one. You said something about 7 generations, and I've read this in several of your chapters and in our first book as well. Can you just briefly talk about what's up with the 7?
When I first started having that knowing of that, I didn't realize that this was also a biblical thing, because the whole biblical side of what I do is fairly new to the party. I'm fixing to be 60. I started hearing things when I was a lot younger, but I really didn't understand it back then. And so there's multiple aspects of that. We have something inside of our body called somatids, and these are what I call the spiritual architects, but they respond to light. They respond to instruction. They always were, they always will be. They can't be killed by fire or ice. It's really a phenomenon. To me, it's the God molecule. And when we, I'm just gonna say, when we fluid bond with other human beings, right, and we're exchanging these molecules with people don't realize how much we're picking up. When they say 2 become 1 in a relationship, they're really exchanging molecules. They're exchanging these somatids. They're exchanging these particles on a regular basis. And they really do create a knowing about one another. But as you generationally pass on these attributes, that is part of what gets passed down generation after generation. Now, they say it's at least 7, but is it really infinite? Because all the somatids in your body right now have always been on this planet. They'll be here 1,000,000 years from now. And so are we really recycling this through our lineage? Is this something that carries the memories and the information, not just the habits and the physical traits? There is a DNA, but they actually are the creators of your DNA, because our DNA is not static. We're born with, it's not like the science when I was a kid, you're born with your genes and it's tough luck. That's what it is. And we know that's not true now. Epigenetics says we change our DNA daily and moment by moment. So with it traveling down like that, part of it is, I'm just going to call it fluid bonding, but part of it is just sharing that, creating a new being, sharing that, creating a new being, sharing that, creating a new being, and you're passing some of those along the entire time. So.
Okay, so there is a lot to learn, isn't there? And I hope, oh my goodness, the way when you said the science has changed, I'm like, holy crap, has it changed? And what I want listeners to understand from this conversation today is there's a lot to learn about what's possible. It's my favorite question of life. What else is possible, right? Because there is so much to learn about it. Thanks for taking us down the somatid road there. That was the first one I read in a couple of your chapters about that. For me, it was a first to read about it. Mary, you're going to close us out today on this question. So we've got listeners, they're feeling maybe still a little bit stuck. How is connecting with the ancestors or the angels going to help them right now?
So when you look in the mirror at your image, what comes back to you? Is it something that you like? Is it something that you want to change? Is it something that you want to embrace? If you're not liking where your life is, and I know during this past year, a lot of us have what we call the word pivot many different times over this past year, I still look in the mirror, and this is where I started way back when, looking in the mirror to see, for me, what was working, what was not working. We, like Larry had said, I think we all have the choice to respond in different ways. You can choose to just automatically go through life. I have friends that do that. But if you really want to seek and change and be the best that you can be, and that's always where I was, I always wanted to be the best. And for a while, that came from a place of lack of self-esteem. It's not any longer. That self-love comes from in here, in your hearts. And that's what carries you through life. That's what helps you figure out what that next step is. So whether you're a beginner here, whether you've been doing this work for a while, it's never too late. And there's always a place and an inn that you can connect with your ancestors, connect with the angels. But doing that, you have to be able to listen. Meditation, I believe, is a whole key place to kind of quiet yourself and get some of those messages to come back to for you.
Oh, she said the M word, you guys, meditation. I know, but I love that. And for me, so best book I ever read on meditation was called True Meditation by Adyashanti. And the reason it was the best book ever is because he's basically saying that any moment of life is an opportunity to meditate. You don't need to sit on a pillow and chant Om with your legs crossed. You can actually just feel the water as you're washing the dishes. You can, yeah. And so it's that mindful presence, that still listening presence. And so that listening is feeling to me. That's how I practice. Thank you, Mary. That was such a perfect place to end our party today. So authors, to all of you, thank you so much for what you do in the world and for being here today to share it with everybody. Thank you, guys. So listeners, join us on October 27th at 12 noon Eastern, because we're going to be having a little celebration live stream book launch party on the Brave Healer Productions Facebook page. And I've got you hooked up down below with that link. All of our authors of the book will be there to share their wisdom and celebrate this powerful, powerful book. And please also drop down to take the next step with these experts. You will find their websites below. Something they said woke you up a little today, spurred you just a little bit. They are waiting to have a conversation with you. Go the next step, check out their websites, grab a call with them. We have so many ways you can connect beyond this show, beyond the book. And I think that's such a big, big gift that all of you authors are available for questions and support. So thank you. And if you're listening after October 27th, well, that means that the book is ready. So you got to head to Amazon and grab your copy, right? The Ancestors Within, discover and connect with your ancient origins. Cannot wait to share this with the world. Lastly, you guys, your words change the world when you're brave enough to share them. It's time to be brave. See you next time, everybody. Thank you, authors.
Thank you, Laura.